ReliaQuest Mental Performance coaches Dr. Nicole Detling and Derin McMains interview top performers across multiple industries to unpack the strategies and the mindset they use to get the job done. Welcome to No Show Dogs, powered by ReliaQuest. Hey, welcome back to the No Show Dogs podcast, powered by ReliaQuest. My name is Derin McMains. I'm ReliaQuest Director of Mental Performance, and I'm alongside my colleague, my teammate, one of our mental performance coaches here at ReliaQuest, Dr. Nicole Detling. Doc, what is going on?
Hey, you know what? It is a beautiful day. The sun is shining. The birds are chirping. What could be better than a beautiful day with an amazing guest on our show today? I'm so stoked for today. I'm more excited than I care to admit. How's that?
Yeah, so we got Kathleen Cox here today. Kat, how are you today?
I'm so excited to be here with you guys and honored and your smiling faces. And I'm happy that it's sunny in Utah.
Yeah, right?
Right?
Take it when we can.
No, I'm so excited, Kat, that you're able to join us today. And it's going to be an incredible episode. Tons of our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this. And so, as we do here on No Show Dogs, let's just jump right into it. And so, Doc, if you don't mind, read Kat's bio and get us kind of up to speed on her journey. And then let's just jump into it.
Absolutely. As a woman who defies stereotypes and embraces diverse experiences, after earning her undergraduate degree, Kathleen's adventurous spirit led her to join the Navy, where she piloted and commanded the MH-60R Seahawk multi-mission helicopter as a naval aviator with Helicopter Strike Maritime Squadron, HSM-73, based out of Coronado, California. Seeking diversity in her service, she embraced an opportunity to support combat operations for the SEAL teams at Naval Special Warfare, serving as at the training detachment for the East Coast SEAL teams under Naval Special Warfare Group 2 as the Air Liaison Officer. She went on to serve in operations at Group 2 as the Air Exercise Planner, coordinating air support for the final pre-deployment certification exercise for all East Coast SEAL teams. In 2021, Kat was selected as a troop commander for the Navy Reserve Unmanned Aircraft Systems Unit at the SEAL Team 18, and she made the pivotal decision to leave active duty and assume this leadership role. Now serving in her 15th year of service, Kathleen was selected as the officer in charge of the Naval Special Warfare Assessment Command Detachment East, where she leads outreach efforts for special operations across America and also acts as the lead for women in special operations. Amazing, Kat. Let's just start there. Absolutely amazing. Thank you for all that you do. That's an incredible bio. And jumping right into that, obviously your bio is impressive. You've accomplished quite a bit throughout your career, but you had to start somewhere. You didn't just achieve all of this overnight. You got your undergraduate degree and then decided to join the Navy. Can you just start by walking us through your journey of what led you to join the Navy in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there's a lot packed in there, right? So I think zoom back to Kat as a little kid. I grew up in the Mojave Desert, a very isolated naval air weapons station called China Lake. It's Southern California, but it's not considered truly Southern California. And my mom is a first generation immigrant from Taiwan. My dad was a cotton farmer and was at the time when I was growing up an engineer for the Department of Defense. And that town it hovers around 25,000 in population, and it's constantly rotating because it's a testing base. So it's mostly test pilots and engineers and anyone that owns a business that's in that town. So the isolation, I think, contributed a lot to how I was able to be raised, not in a bubble, but in a restricted environment where my parents had a lot of autonomy to influence us because we didn't have social media. We didn't have I didn't watch a lot of TV growing up. I am the youngest of three sisters. And we are all very unique in our own ways, but very similar as well. And I think our parents were able to instill in us some very deep core values, but with those core values obviously came expectations, right? A lot of those expectations centered around doing well academically, excelling in the violin, the piano, chess, being a mathlete, all of those things. And I think that all, if it comes back to me now, it comes back in the sense of they were trying to instill hard work to achieve the autonomy to be happy and successful in life. But at the time, it's hard to see it when you're in it like that, right? So I was the proverbial black sheep of my family. My two oldest sisters seemed like it came easy to them. They worked really hard, but one has a photographic memory. And the other one, I think, is just truly brilliant as well. We were expected to get straight A's. We were expected to be concertmisters for the orchestra. We were expected to go to Ivy League colleges. And both my sisters went to Yale. They both went to law school. They both minored while they were at Yale in the piano and the violin. And I kind of floundered. I didn't want to practice. I wanted to play sports. I wanted to hang out with my friends. My parents actually told me that I was going to grow up to be the play champion of the world. But with that came also a lightheartedness, right? I was a social butterfly. I wanted to always have a team around me, always have a support team of friends and mentors. I'm sure it caused my parents a lot of apprehension. So fast forward to, I didn't get into Yale. I went to UCLA to stay pretty close to Southern California. Majored in marine biology. I was in a sorority, which was awesome, but not at all geared towards the military. I will say that one thing that I think instilled the military service to me was that all of my friends' dads were pilots, but I never once saw a female pilot growing up in China Lake for my first 18 years. But then I remember 9/11 happening when I was in high school and I was getting ready to go to school that morning. And I remember watching it on the news with my dad on the couch, not really understanding what was going on. Years later, though, when I reflect, like all of my friends, they got pulled, whose dads were in the service, they got pulled out of school throughout the day. And then when I was in college, there was a lot of news media because the war was going on. It was kicking off. It was at its height. And there was always a sense of, I want to serve. I want to be that person. I don't want to be watching it on the news. But then I graduated. I was supposed to be the doctor of the family when my two older sisters were lawyers. And I was studying for the MCAT in Starbucks in Ridgecrest, visiting my folks. And one of my best friends growing up, her father, who was a test pilot, walked into Starbucks. And I'm sitting there with a 600-page MCAT book, just probably looking pretty miserable or falling asleep. I'm not sure. And he just said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Studying to go to medical school." And he said, you always showed me that you liked adventure and you're young, you should think about naval aviation. And I looked up at him, and at that moment I was like, yes, you're right. I do want to go do something fun like that. That sounds really fun. It sounds like it aligns with my core values, and I could be on the front lines just like the folks that I'm seeing on the news that are putting it all out there. And from that moment, I walked out at Starbucks, and that was what I was going to do. I didn't have a female pilot mentor. I had never really considered it truly that much till that moment, and it was done.
Gosh, isn't that amazing? Like how it all came together at a chance meeting in Starbucks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about core values. What are those core values that your parents instilled in you, but then you some you probably brought with you, but others you kind of figured out on your own?
Yeah, and I constantly go back to this to see if I can refine what I learned when I was younger and how it developed me into who I am right now. Whether I'm an adult or not, I'm not sure. But really, I think an immigrant mother, right? So she had advanced degrees. But when she moved here with my father to the United States, they didn't carry over. So she went and started working at restaurants. She was assisting in education with special needs children. She always worked. And my dad always worked. And then when he retired, he had a business that he fixed televisions. Everything in our house, when it broke, we went and fixed it. We never went and just bought a new one. And I think putting all of that together, what it taught me was resilience, grit, the mental attitude that nothing is beyond your ability to control, and that you couldn't just replace something. You always have to put hard work into it. And that's how I was brought up. I mean, when I was 16 years old, all my friends were getting cars, and I was pestering my father about getting a car. And he came to me one day, he said, "Come with me, Kathleen, to go drop off this television I fixed." And I love to ride with my dad to go do these things. So we went, and as payment, I guess the lady told my dad he could have her 73 bright yellow Super Beetle. And so I was so excited when she said that. And then we put it on the trailer, and it was the shell of a Beetle with an engine, a pile of engine parts behind it. And I looked at my dad, and I was just questioning, how is this going to drive me? How am I going to drive to school in this? And he said, "Well, you're going to spend the whole summer with me, and I'm going to be there to help you, and we're going to get it to work, and you're going to drive it to school." And I don't know if it was shock, or it was shock and excitement together, maybe. And then me thinking of the summer heat in Ridgecrest, which is usually 110 with 0% humidity by 10 o'clock in the morning. So that whole summer, we woke up at 5 a.m. We went to the shop, and he would point at things and tell me something. And then I'd try to put the puzzle together, and I'd fail. And then I'd catch something on fire, maybe a couple times. And then he'd come back and tell me again, and I'd try again. And that repetitive micro failures, I would say, where he knew I wasn't doing anything dangerous. It was a controlled environment, but he wanted me to work my way through it. And then on that first day of school, I drove that 73 Super Beetle to school with a lot of pride and ownership. And I learned a lot that summer. And I think I grew a lot as an individual in terms of my grit and resilience through that experience. He knew that I had to do that in order to know that I could achieve things with hard work that seemed completely out of my realm, I would say. But the car did break down at the stoplight, and I had to push it into the parking lot, which is great because those cars are really light, really easy to push. And that happened several times, but I still have that car to this day. I won't let anyone sell it. And I intend on getting it out here to Virginia so that my daughter can drive it, even though she refuses to.
That's so good. That's so good. Kat, how did that experience help you when you got to the Navy, right? Like you mentioned you never saw a female pilot, and you didn't even know it was really an option until this chance meeting at Starbucks. And then you get there, and I imagine when you're there, you probably don't see a lot of female pilots, right? Is my guess once you get there. And so it's all new. Your other two sisters are at Yale. Like there's not like, I would imagine, a lot of people you can lean on, or, hey, how does this work? And so just curious, like, how did you navigate this brand new territory? Were your parents supportive? I'm thinking about that. Like, how did you just navigate all this new that you're walking into, and risk and uncertainty, and just find your way to where you are now?
Yeah. And another point is I had no idea how aircraft flew. I had no idea you had to use your feet to fly an aircraft. It's really embarrassing now. My sister actually made me watch Top Gun before I went into officer candidate school, which is the first step.
Awesome.
Yeah. But you hit it right on the nail. There was something innate from my upbringing, nature or nurture, or a combination of both, that was inviting to me about doing something that I was totally uncomfortable doing. But that was through experience. I saw my parents. My mom walked away from her degree in her life and started and waited tables and hosted restaurants. My dad he worked every single day. He got up at the same time every single morning. No matter how hot the day was, he was out doing work. Nothing was ever beyond reach. And the fact that I was a woman, obviously my dad didn't say, well, she's not going to work on cars because she's a girl. Like there was never a moment of even addressing that. It was never a thing. So I think when I decided to do something that I hadn't seen another woman do, it wasn't a thing for me either. Of course, I say it wasn't a thing, but it obviously is something we're all cognizant of, right? If you walk into a room and you feel like all of these things are pretty similar, except for me, you have this feeling always that you're showing up and you're going to have to show out. And that's something that I've developed, but it doesn't make it so seamless that every time I step into a room, it's not something that I notice. But I've been able to harness that feeling, and through experience, I've been able to use it to get better at doing that. And I think I want to continue doing till the day that I leave this earth, is challenging myself in that way so that I feel growth internally every single time that happens. And it's almost like it's exciting to me at this point, because I've been able to prove to myself that I can, through a couple of mechanisms, right? Being prepared, always working hard, always asking questions, and being eager to learn, that bias for action will get you through anything. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to fail along the way, because failure, I think, is just as important as success, and then really the stepping stone to it. But when I showed up at Officer Candidate School, for example, I think I was the only female in my class. And back then, they don't do it now. This was 2009. They would give you all the men had their heads shaved completely, like big razor shave. And the women had to have a 1 inch on top, shaved on the sides. And I had over 40 inches of hair when I went. My hair was part of my physical identity. And it is today still, but the aspect of letting go of that completely and trying to find something else that I appreciate about myself was exciting to me and scary. There's always fear there. It's how you take that fear and you take it to the next level and you work through it. And that was it seems so minuscule maybe, but for me, shaving my head was a big deal. And how I handled that and how I came out of it was also a big deal to me. Just a little piece of that experience.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff that I want to unpack, mostly around that feeling of, I'm looking in the room and I'm different, right? Or, like, and there's a feeling, yeah. And there's a feeling inside of you that you get. And in the civilian world, and we hear a lot of this, it has this term coined imposter syndrome, right? And imposter syndrome is, again, it's not so much used in the military. In fact, when we were talking to you about this, you were like, I've never heard of this in my life, right? And so
very few times, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's definitely more prevalent out in society, in the corporate world, and again, in professional sports, in my experience, and Doc, I would assume yours too, like, we don't hear it a lot, right? We haven't coined that phrase because it's just, you're generally always in a challenging situation, and there's always some sort of doubt that goes into that situation. There is some feelings of inadequacy. There's uncertainty, but you do it anyway because it's like the mission's more important than how you feel in the moment and all those types of things, right? There's a lot that goes into that. But like, I love how you said you harness that feeling into your preparation, into working hard and asking questions and eager to learn. And so, but not everybody does that, right? Some people, it locks them up and they're like, I don't know if I can do that. And so based on your experience and how you've been able to push through, what are some lessons or things that you would share with people to say, hey, I'm sure you're feeling this, but here's what I did, or here's what I leaned into, or here's how I thought about it to help me continue to move forward to do everything that I wanted to do?
It's funny because I did spend 3 years when I first went into the reserves in the corporate sector. So that going into that corporate sector and then coming back into the military and coming from the military, I get to see them almost side by side. And while we use different terms for things, we're humans. We're all humans, and we're all feeling at the core. We have very similar reactions to things. It's just the words that we use are different. So when I went back and I tried to really understand the terminology and the imposter syndrome itself, and it really is something that I think every single human being feels what that is. Every time you do something new, if you are going to flight school or you're going to college for your first day of college, you're sitting in that class and you're looking around, there's maybe people that have been there their second year or their third year, the professor, for example. Everybody has a different level of experience. I think when you try something new, everybody on planet Earth feels that they are not the smartest person in the room, not the most experienced person in the room. That's natural. You're supposed to feel that. So I think accepting the fact that when you show up to do something new, you are going to be the new person. You're going to be the beginner, right? And you have to be able to maybe take a slice of humble pie and have some humility on the day you show up. Exercising humility is one of the most critical ways to deal with anxiety, I think, or apprehensions or any of the symptoms of imposter syndrome, right? Accepting the fact that I'm here, I'm a beginner, I'm going to have anxiety, I'm going to have fear, and that's okay. It's okay. I can't tell you every single thing I went through, every single new thing that I did, that I've done in my life. It's a huge milestone for me. And I always had a fear, an innate fear. I always had anxiety going into it. But how do you work through that? That's what you're asking, right? So how did I work through it? And I got better at it. I'm still getting better at it. That's what I would say too. Accepting that you're new is the first thing. Having humility. How do you get humility? Humility is something that garners trust, it garners buy-in, it's good leaders have humility, right? And that's just being able to say, I know what I'm good at, I know my experience, and I know that I'm not the best. We have a saying that says you've never arrived. And it doesn't matter how experienced you are in anything you're doing, if the second you think that you're the best at it, you stop growing. And it's really critical that you always are hungry to learn more and to get better and to learn from people and to learn from other people's experiences. And that's so critical to any team, is to have that humility. So I think humility is the first thing. You show up, you don't try to run your mouth, you don't let your ego take the best of you. I mean, Nicole, you read off my bio. It sounds great, but in the back, I'm like, all the failures and all the tears and all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that. That's what I'm truly proud of, is the journey and then the experiences along the way, the failures along the way, and how I conquered them. So really, another huge piece is preparedness. Even when you said, let's talk about imposter syndrome, I researched it. I always want to learn as much as I can before I step into a room on my own, but then be willing to hear other people's opinions and to think about them and to really put some thought into them before I pass any judgment or I pass any negative connotations towards anyone's ideas. I think that's a huge piece of it. The more prepared you are for something, the better you are executing anything, even if it's your first time or it's your 100th time doing it or 1,000th time doing it, right? When I think about the civilian sector versus the military sector, everything we do in military, we've done it so many times. In training, we have practiced all the contingencies we can fathom to do safely in training, so that when we actually go and do it, we are ready for all the contingencies. And if anything goes awry, which it will, a plan is just something to deviate from, truly, you've handled contingencies and you're past that innate fear that's incapacitating. And you can handle an actual emergency and take care of it to make sure that ultimate failure doesn't occur, which, in the military, ultimate failure could mean losing somebody. And I think that preparedness is so critical. So as much as you can, and that comes into bias for action, right? When you tell somebody they're going to do something, do they sit on their laurels and just twiddle their fingers and say, I'm going to wing it? Maybe some things in life it's okay to do that with. But in most cases, that bias for action that tells you, I've got this phone in my hand that I can search all over the internet with. I've got a computer. I've got people I can talk to that have experience. There's so many ways to prepare yourself for something that if you're leaving that on the table, you've already given up in a sense. And why would you put any effort into something that you have already internally given up on? So that preparedness is so critical. Yeah. And I think a really big thing internally for everybody that is stepping into something new is to set expectations for yourself and be realistic about it. Know yourself. If you haven't spent some time by yourself in a room thinking about yourself and your interactions and the way that you talk to people and the way you feel and how those things are related, then you don't know what to expect. And you should always expect the unexpected, right? There's so many different sayings out there, but at the same time, you should kind of know yourself well enough to understand how much work do I have to do? How much preparedness do I have to put into this to ease as much of the anxiety as possible when I step through that door, or when I step into that op, or when I step into the helo. So I think that's a very critical piece of it.
No Show Dogs is brought to you by ReliaQuest, a global leader in cybersecurity. ReliaQuest helps enterprise cybersecurity teams increase visibility, reduce complexity, and manage risk through its security operations platform, Gray Matter. Powered by decades of experience and streamlined by AI and automation, ReliaQuest exists to make security possible. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com. Just to summarize, kind of what I heard was accept your beginner status, right? Accept that. 2, exercise humility. 3, prepare like heck, right? And then 4, set expectations for yourself by knowing yourself, right? Spend time with yourself, get to know yourself so you can set the realistic expectations that that you can hold yourself to when you're in any new situation. And so good, right? And I love how you've broken that down for us in regards to when we get that feeling of like, can I do this? Do I belong here? So thanks for marking those out for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to take it just in a little bit of a different direction, because you're talking a lot about stepping into a new situation, but there are certainly people who've been there for a while who still have these feelings, and I think that's really challenging in a way. But I also want to throw out this notion of, why is imposter syndrome always bad? Right? In some ways, if we go back to what you said earlier, you've never arrived. Right? If you never, ever feel like you don't belong, or if you never, ever question yourself and what you're doing, you're probably not growing. You're probably not experiencing or giving yourself the opportunity to experience new things and to actually push yourself in uncomfortable ways. And I think that's what imposter syndrome really is you've put yourself in a situation that's a little beyond your comfort zone. And that's good. We want you to do that. We encourage you to do that. But let's go back to, some people feel it even though they've been there for a while, right? Whether circumstances change, maybe a new leader comes in, new environment, you've been given a new assignment or a new project, or it's not going the way that you had planned or you had thought. Those things happen every single day. So how would you then advise people who maybe are not new to a situation, they've been there for a while, yet they still experience some of these doubts that they creep up from time to time? What would you tell those people?
That's growth. I welcome it, right? You want to feel uncomfortable. You have to have moments where everything is as expected and there's no surprises and you're in a controlled environment, but variables are inevitable. Things always change. I experience this in the military. I experience it in the corporate sector too, right? Things are constantly changing around you. Control the things that you can control, and ease off yourself on the things you can't control, because you have to adapt to them. That agility is so critical. And all that means, if you feel that way because one thing changed, one variable changed, great. Now you can go and prepare yourself to handle that variable, and that's personal growth. That is the only thing that we have that we can continue to grow upon, right? No matter what is going on around us. It's on us. We have the autonomy to prepare for that. We want things to change. Invite it and just try to exercise the humility, the bias for action. And one thing that I didn't say in there that I think is really critical, whether I'm on a team in the military or I'm leading a team in the corporate sector, is the team. Because we're not meant to be sole operators. Like, this is why I chose to fly helos, is we have a crew. I always want to be surrounded by a great team. And you may be able to choose your team. You may not be able to choose your team. You may not necessarily agree with your leader in all circumstances. But the point is that if we're meant to be social beings, it is critical to build trust and buy-in with your team. I always said I would do anything if I had the best team with me, the people that I could be myself with. I respect them, but you're not always going to have that on day 0, or when one person leaves and a new person comes in. You might be like, well, that's not the person that I loved that was in the seat before. That's okay. This is your opportunity to grow, to get to know that individual, to learn from that individual, to share experiences, to build trust, to build buy-in. And this is you becoming more resilient as an individual, which is always going to help you. So take the time to build trust. And I know that's difficult. You can say it, right? Trust is really hard to build. But be yourself. Do work hard. Like showing people that you work hard and that you respect their hard work, whether you're a leader or you're someone on the team that's being led, you have the ability to do that. It's all within every individual's power to do that. It takes somebody to be self-aware and to be willing to exercise vulnerability in order to do that. So again, back to the humility aspect, right?
Kat, I want to ask you about this research study that was done around imposter syndrome. So 2019, a woman by the name of Claire Joseph. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Claire, I know you're listening to this, so if I didn't get it right, just shoot me an email. But so she did a study, 2019. It's called the Imposter Syndrome Research Study, and in that study, they identified 5 core fears that drive imposter syndrome, and I want to share these with you, and then which one stands out the most to you? Like which one kind of what was the toughest one for you to push through? And so what they identified in this study was 5 core fears that drive imposter syndrome. Number 1, fear of failure. Number 2, fear of success. Number 3, fear of criticism. Number 4, fear of rejection. And number 5 was the fear of the lack of money, which is kind of interesting when you hear the first 4, but we won't unpack that. But anyway, when you hear those 5, which one was the biggest obstacle for you, and how did you push through that fear in particular?
Definitely the fear of failure. I feel like that it drives and it inhibits people at the same time. It has the most powerful influence on your happiness and success in life, but it can be the absolute downfall of individuals as well. And I think it leads to all the other things that you just mentioned, the other 4. Because in my experience, that's the one thing that I feel is always the first question when you're trying something new. It's always the first question when you feel anxiety. It's a fear. Fear drives us. But fear is not bad. And that's where it's so interesting when we're doing outreach events with my team right now, and we're talking to high school students, right, who may or may not have any interest in the military. And they're asking us about what we've done and what are the craziest things we've done, what are the most dangerous things we've done. And then we had a young woman recently ask, well, weren't you scared? Absolutely. I invite fear because I know that it means that I'm challenging myself. And really that is when you look around you at the people that you know or the people that you see on TV and you see them make decisions that maybe they didn't want to make. Maybe they have a little bit of regret on those. What drives those decisions in most cases, you drop back to fear of something, right? And I think fear is the stepping stone for success. It's the reason why you do things because of peer pressure. It's the reason why you choose to give up opportunities. And the money piece, I think that's, money can mean food sustenance, safety, and all those things. So I'm not really sure about that one, but that's how I feel about those 5.
I think that's incredible. And when we think about this, I just want to point this out for our listeners, right? When we fail in the civilian sector, right, we lose a deal, we might lose a job, which is really challenging. But at the end of the day, you're going to go find another job, right? Eventually, you're going to find another job. Or in sports, we lose a game, we lose a championship. We're super disappointed. It's really heartbreaking, but we go home to our families at the end of the day. You go to bed, you wake up in the morning, you figure out what you're going to do the next day. Whereas in the military, that ultimate fear means you or one of your teammates doesn't come home. doesn't come home. So I feel like that fear of failure is at a very different level in the military than perhaps what we experience as civilians. And I'm curious if you have other strategies or anything specific, like at the military level, that you talk about or that you train people in the military to manage that fear of failure on that higher level. Because I've certainly heard lots of war stories from friends and family members who've served and who've been at war, that a lot of people, they can prepare as good as they possibly can and do all the things, but then that adrenaline hits, and in that moment bullets are flying and they freeze. They just cannot act. And so that fear of failure becomes paralyzing to them in those moments. So I just love to hear you riff a little bit more on that and how perhaps the military trains people to manage that, so that perhaps we can learn from it in the civilian world when our stakes aren't quite as high, yet the fear is still very real. That fear of failure is still very real.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing there with all the different types of fear of failure, right? The first thing that I always do, to the point where my husband sometimes laughs at me with the small things that I do this with, is I assess risk. I assess risk, because failure on a combat mission and failure on a product launch in the corporate sector are two different levels of risk. You have to ask yourself, when you're encountering these situations, what is my level of risk that I'm willing to assume? And how can I mitigate risk so that it's at an acceptable level for me to execute what I'm trying to do? And when you talk about that at product launches, yeah, I mean, if it goes really badly and I'm at the head of it, maybe I'll get fired. But what you said, Nicole, I get to go home to my family. I get to try again with something else, which is a great new adventure. Turn it to the military side, right? There are certain types of failure that we will do everything possible, because that failure and the risk of kids and a spouse and a family being affected for the rest of their life and someone losing their life, that risk is so difficult and so great. We have to really practice and train, and that's where the preparation is key, because when you have people in situations where they freeze, and I still have situations that happen, most of them are like with my kids and things that I just haven't practiced 1,000 times. That's where knowing yourself is really critical, and you're not always going to be able to prepare for every single contingency. You just can't. But knowing how you react to situations can help you react better when it happens, if it does happen. And that's where the resilience piece, which you guys are really honing on, right? That's why it's the name of the podcast, like, show me, because when you do it, repetition builds resilience. It builds grit. Keep trying it. The variables will change. The outcomes will change when you're practicing it, and it prepares you for when it really happens. But you can't let that fear drive you. It's different types of fear based on risk, right? So assessing the risk makes it either a micro failure that's a stepping stone to something better, or if it's a huge risk, do what you can, practice what you can, like we do in the military, and if things go awry, we handle it from there, and that's because you have resilience and you have the grit to get through that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a really great answer. So, our last question here that we ask of all of our guests, right? Our podcast is called No Show Dogs because we don't like, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter how pretty it is. At the end of the day, we are all about action and getting the job done, even if it's ugly, right? We want everybody coming home at the end of the day. So, our last question then, what are those things that you were willing to do that maybe others weren't, that has helped you be successful throughout your life and your career?
Such a great question. And I constantly think about this, and I learn this from other people, from my own experiences. So it's both. It's not just me learning this. I think one of the best things that we can do if we are in the company of somebody that's elderly is talk to them and get their experience, gain their experiences. People will share. They want to pass on their knowledge and their wisdom, and experience is the only thing money can't buy. So taking those opportunities, and that's what I do that. And I think that what I've learned is when our last day on this earth comes, what does it look like to have regret? And what does that come from? And what I've been able to garner from other people's experiences is that when you turn down an opportunity to do something that makes you uncomfortable, that challenges every ounce of your being, you turn that opportunity down because of fear of all of the things that you can be scared of. Fear of something new, fear of not succeeding, fear of failure, all of those. That's when you open yourself up for regret, and I don't want to be there. So one thing that I tell when we speak to younger generations is that don't say no to an opportunity if just because it makes you scared, because it causes you anxiety, because the paths that we've forged, everybody, when we do something that's difficult and off the beaten path, that's opening up gateways for the next generation. And that's critical because look where we are today. We didn't get here because people turned away from opportunities because they were afraid, because people didn't stick to their core values, because they didn't have humility. We got there because people were willing to break through those barriers, because they were willing to accept the fact that they do have anxiety about things. They are fearful of the outcome, but they prepare, they're humble, and they do the right thing. And that's using your core values, but also assessing risk in a situation and making a decision that you're not going to give up an opportunity because you're scared or because it's it's making you feel anxiety or any of those negative feelings that you just want to turn away from and go sit on your couch and watch your favorite TV show up, right? Like there's comfort, and then there's comfort in knowing that you're doing something that makes you uncomfortable and that you're growing. And I think that that's something that always comes back to me when I come to a decision point. I internalize, I think about it, and I say, why am I scared? Is it because I'm going to hurt somebody that I love? Is it because I'm going to jeopardize something that's really critical to my family and to the people that I care about? Or is it because I am scared of failure? I am scared of not succeeding. I am scared that I'm not going to be able to do this to the best of my ability. And if it's me that I'm afraid of and my outcomes, then I go prepare and I research and I talk to people and I find out more and I go forward and I do it. And I might fail. I have failed a lot, but that's great. That's you growing, and you'll get better. Keep your head up and keep charging forward.
Incredible. I love it. Preparation. Oh, yeah. It comes back to preparation. Don't be afraid of failure. Push into it. Learn from it. Prepare better next time. Prepare more. Yeah, I love it. Fantastic. Thank you, Kat.
Kat, this is so good. I got so many notes. I got like 2 pieces of paper here in this notebook. So I just want to kind of summarize a lot of the stuff that I heard, because there's so much good here that I want to make sure people don't miss it. Right. And it's like, you talked about resilience and grit, and you mentioned early from your childhood that you realized that nothing is beyond your ability. Like, go fix it, go find a way. Talked about the preparation and, as Doc just mentioned, the working hard, asking questions, eager to learn. How do you step into uncertainty? Accept your beginner status, exercise humility, preparation, set expectations for yourself by knowing yourself, lean into the power of team. Then you dropped a few more nuggets here on the end about repetition builds resilience. I love that so much. Repetition builds resilience. Like, let's stop discussing what only can be learned with reps, right? Like, let's stop talking about how to build resilience and just go do the thing, right? Go build the resilience by getting in there. And then a few more things here right at the end where you said, succumbing to fear opens you up for regret. I just want to say that again. Succumbing to fear opens you up for regret. So true. And then this last one I never heard before, and I love what you said, where you said there's comfort, and then there is comfort in knowing you're growing by doing something uncomfortable, right? And it's just so much good here. I got so fired up. Sorry, I was I got a hand cramp now. So anyway, all great.
You're welcome.
Yes. So Kat, thank you so much. I know after our listeners hear this, they're going to want to reach out to you, connect with you. Where is the best place that they can find you and connect with you going forward?
I would say probably my LinkedIn, just Kathleen Cox. You'll find me. I'll be there. No fear.
Kathleen is with a K.
Yes, Kathleen with a K. across the sea.
Awesome. Kat, thank you so much. Doc, as always love just learning alongside you from, some of the best performers in the world. So Kat, thank you again for all that you've done for our country.
You're awesome.
Yeah. And thanks for being amazing and being willing to come on the No Show Dogs podcast and
Thank you.
go out there and make it a great today.